Hi, I'm Kevin Rushforth, and today I will be presenting JavaFX 20 and some stuff about what might come next. So this is a quick agenda of what we're going to cover today. I'll give a brief overview of what JavaFX is, talk a little bit about our community involvement, talk about our releases through JavaFX 20, and talk a little bit about what's coming next, as well as a couple of demos that I'll be showing you. A demo of JavaFX Notebook and Rich Text, which I'll get into later, and then some stuff about JavaFX features. So JavaFX is a UI toolkit that's designed to allow desktop and mobile applications to do rich graphics and media content in their applications. We first delivered it back in 2011. Its programming paradigm is a scene graph. So you define things in terms of nodes with hierarchy and positioning with a transform specified at each node. It's multi-platform. We provide desktop libraries for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And through Glue on Mobile and Glue on Embedded, we provide implementations that run on iOS, Android, and various Linux ARM machines like Raspberry Pi. Capabilities, it's got a complete set of UI controls. You can use CSS styling to customize your controls. You use layout containers to position the various elements, either in a vertical or horizontal row or a grid or other ways that you might want to lay them out. We have built-in charting capability, 2D and 3D graphics. And then we also allow you to embed media and web content in your application. With JavaFX Swing Interop, you can take your existing Swing application and embed a JavaFX panel in there. Or you can do it the other way around. You can take a JavaFX application and embed a Swing node inside of that. And then we have a rich properties and bindings API that allows you to very easily take properties and bind them between different parts of your data model. And we can have animation that drive those properties, whether or not they are graphics related. JavaFX is fully hardware accelerated under the cover, so we use whatever the best native platform API is, which today is OpenGL on Mac and Linux, and Direct3D on Windows. We have a software pipeline fallback for the few systems, usually those over a remote desktop or virtualization environment is the only place we see that today, and on some older Linux machines. That's an automatic fallback that supports most things. Yeah, question?
Do you want questions during the presentation?
Go ahead and ask them now. That would be fine.
Okay, so the question will be about Metal on Mac OS.
Cool. We have a slide on that later. So the answer is yes, we're working on that. So the question was about Metal for Apple. Yes, we're working on it. We have a window toolkit that handles the window system events, accessibility, and various other things, platform operations like windowing. So just a few examples of what you can do with JavaFX. We ship along with FX, or at least it's in our repository, a sample called Ensemble that's basically a one of everything that we can do. This is an example of a virtual thread visualizer for Project Loom that was done recently and showed at Java 1. We also showed at Java 1 an interop. This is an example of Swing Interop. So this is a program called JMail that we just wrote to demonstrate Java desktop applications on top of JDK 17 using both Swing and client libs for JavaFX for the UI. And then we've got various examples. If you go to OpenJFX.io, we have a number of use cases there that people have put up there. So building and running your JavaFX application is as simple as downloading either a pre-built SDK or a set of JMod files and linking that into your JDK. So you can do either one, and then you can use jpackage to distribute your app. So this is an example of using JLink to build a JDK that has JavaFX included. So first thing you do is you would download your JDK, then you would download JavaFX, and then you run the JLink command that's shown above, or shown right below that bullet item there. And then that will produce you a JDK with all modules, including the JavaFX modules that are there. Alternatively, you can use JLink to produce a custom JDK that's tuned for just your application that can be much smaller. And in either case, you can use jpackage to create your application. What that will do is that will bundle the parts of the Java runtime that you need, along with your application classes or modules, into a single application bundle that is customized for your platform. And so that would be a DMG on Mac, or it would be, a .deb or PKG, .deb or a .rpm on Linux, or a .exe on Windows. And we have other formats that you can support as well. And there are other platform-specific options for setting up file choosers and file associations, shortcuts, that sort of thing. As an alternative, if you prefer just to use this as a development environment and it's easier for you because your IDE supports it, you can use Maven. And Gluon puts the Maven modules for all of the JavaFX releases into Maven Central. So now just a little bit about the JavaFX community. JavaFX is one of the projects under the OpenJDK umbrella. We have our main source code repository on GitHub, along with all the JDK repositories. It's on GitHub/OpenJDK is where all of the OpenJDK community does their software development. We have a mailing list that we use for discussion and contributions, and then we welcome bug fixes from the community, and with a little more effort, we even welcome new features to come in. Although there's a pretty high bar for those, we've managed to have some pretty significant community-driven features in the last several releases. So talking about new features a little bit, we have a high bar for quality because we also believe in backward compatibility. We take that very seriously. And so new features go far beyond, hey, I've got this cool idea, it helps my app. Thank you, and you're welcome for this code. I was like, no, we don't really want drive-by contributions. We want people to think in terms of stewardship. So if you want to help improve the JavaFX toolkit, we would love that and welcome that. But you need to be prepared to both motivate why it helps not just your application, but other applications in general, and you need to be willing to put in the work to turn it into a first-class feature that we can support for years. The inclusion of new features is guided by the OpenJFX project leads, which is myself and Johan Voss. And our overarching goal is that it needs to fit in well with our existing set of features, and it needs to be something that we can implement across the variety of platforms we do and be maintainable. We released JavaFX on the same 6-month release cadence that the JDK does, and it's no accident that we use the same numbering that they do. We just released JavaFX 20. They just released JDK 20 today, same time. And for 11 through 19, we did the same thing. And we plan to do it for 21 and 22 and so on. And just like the JDK, especially now that we're in a 6-month release, we can say with confidence that we use a train model. The train does not wait at the station. Features that are ready make this release. Features that miss it make the next release. It's really simple. Because we are unbundled, we have at least a little bit more work that we have to do to make sure that we don't break people. And one of the things that means is because we release them at the same time and we're doing early accesses at the same time, we can't make it a hard requirement that JavaFX 20 requires JDK 20 in order to run. And so we will always guarantee, as long as we're releasing this in an unbundled fashion like this, that you can run it on JDK N-1. And in practice, what we will do is only bump it when there's a compelling reason to do it. And we've found through talking to our community members and our application developers that they really would prefer it if we stuck to LTSs. Because otherwise, if you bump to a non-LTS release, you're going to end up bumping it again a year later or 6 months later. And so what we did with that in mind is that JavaFX 11 through 19 run on JDK 11 or later. And we bumped it up to JavaFX 17 for JavaFX 20. JDK 17 for JavaFX 20. And we'll continue to do that going forward. So a little bit about some of the highlights of the release of JavaFX that we've done in the last few years. Starting in September of 2021, we released JavaFX 17. Of course, we had releases before that, but I'm only going to highlight the last few. And we had a few notable features that went in there. Like the JDK, we don't have a huge number of features that go into any release, but we want to kind of come up with a few different features each release. And so we added 3D spotlights and the ability to load inline data URL images and a few other things that you can read there. 3D spotlights, so we added 3D lighting for JDK 8. And at the time, we only had point light with no attenuation, which was added later, and only ambient. So we didn't have a directional light, we didn't have a spotlight, and we didn't have attenuation. Well, attenuation was added back in, I think, JavaFX 15 or something like that, 15 or 16. Well, in 17, we also added spotlights. And so that adds direction and a cone of influence to give you more realistic lighting effects. The intention here is not to do full-on 3D games, but to allow you to do a more realistic effect, and people have used that to good effect. And then also you can load images or style sheets using data URIs. All browsers support that, and it's just a nice, easy way to be able to do that without having to manage external assets for something as simple as a checkerboard or a little dot that you're going to distribute with your application. In JavaFX 18, which was released a year ago, we included, for the first time in a while, a new media codec that we supported. H.256 has been increasing in popularity, and it was something that had been long missing from FX, and so we added a codec for that. We also added, as I alluded to earlier, a 3D directional light and a couple of other minor features. So the directional light is something you can think of as being like sunlight. It's a light source that, for all practical purposes, is far enough away that the rays are parallel. So think the sun and how it illuminates things on the Earth. JavaFX 19 was released last September. And in addition to, as a follow-on to the H.256, we added HTTP live streaming for that, because that's another thing that was missing. And we also added some additional binding and property support in the flavor of flat map or else and fluent bindings, and a couple of other minor features. So the fluent bindings, actually it fills a hole. You could have done this. There's nothing that this enables that you couldn't have done with a whole lot of complicated code that you have to manage and listeners that you have to manage yourself. What this gives you is a very easy way to create a binding based on like a cascading chain of properties where you actually want to write the logic yourself. And in this case, we showed doing it with just standard properties, but you could even put any consumer in there and end up creating fairly complex binding chains. And we've used this ourselves in subsequent releases, so it's very handy. And another thing that you can do on most websites that gives you just a little bit of a better UI feel to it is you can distinguish between whether or not an item that gets focused should be highlighted as focus visible. And the general way you do that is if you get to it via keyboard shortcuts, you do want it to be highlighted, but if you click on it with a mouse, you don't, or vice versa. Depends on what your paradigm is. And the other one is focus within. Focus within allows you to say, well, I might not have focus, but I'm inside something that does. And both of those are CSS stylable, and on web pages through HTML, they tend to be used. And so now you can do that through JavaFX. So JavaFX 20 was released a mere 7 hours ago, maybe. This is hot off the press, brand new, March 20. Oh, I said 2022, didn't I? March 21st, 2023. So I'll fix that before I post the slides. Yeah, we did not go back in time a year. We released it today. Included in that release were several enhancements and bug fixes. And some of the more notable features that I'll highlight is a new upgraded version of Marlin, which is our rasterizer. And that fixed not only a number of bugs, but came with it a significant performance improvement. We also added constrained resize policies, including the ability to customize them. And we improved the life cycle of UI control skins in a way that allows us to be able to do it without having memory leaks. And then again, we added a little bit more ease of use to managing listeners. So I'll talk about a couple of those. First, the constrained resize policy. There are two reasons we did this. Number one, the resize policies were not flexible enough. There was a single constrained resize policy, and you either take it or leave it. And it didn't allow a lot of the things that Swing has allowed for years or that applications might want to do. And even though in theory it suggested you might be able to subclass and customize it, you really couldn't. And the second reason we did it is for bug fixes. It was not very robust. There were any number of cases where you would get a scroll bar even though you shouldn't have, and then there were cases where it just didn't work correctly. All of those were fixed by adding a number of new policies to allow better control over it, and at the same time the implementation was rewritten to use those, sort of a common framework that allows you to, regardless of the mode, end up having something that's robust. And so we've deprecated the existing constrained resize policy, and it actually maps onto one of the new ones, but we didn't preserve complete compatibility. We did not retain the bugs that were in the old one. So it's a bug-fixed version of what it used to do. And the other thing we added that's worth noting is simplified deterministic managing of listeners. So very simply, we added an observable value.when function. This is another one towards making it easier to write code that doesn't leak and that has a more predictable life cycle. There's even more coming in the next release. But one of the big problems is if you have a long-lived property and then you bind to that, that binding is going to be active and keep that long-lived property active. So what you do is you get something where you can't have something eligible for GC. And so in this example, you can have a Boolean property. Normally, in this case, I made it a constant, but in reality, that Boolean property could be an expression. And as long as that expression is true, the binding holds. And referencing the binding will keep the object alive. When the binding goes to false, or the condition goes to false, then that goes away. And so that allows it to be GC'd if there are no other strong refs. Now looking forward a little bit to JavaFX 21, we have our mainline repository, which is OpenJDK/JFX, and mainline is open for 21. We've already been putting out EA releases for a couple of months. And you can download the EA releases, you can contribute code if you find a bug, and that will go into JavaFX 21. It's going to run on JDK 17 or later, just like JavaFX 20 is, and we recommend that you download JavaFX 21 and JDK 21 EA at the same time and run them together. We're going to be testing that to make sure that's the best combination for you. And the GA will be sometime in September 2023, and we'll announce the schedule when the JDK does. We have a few small enhancements that are underway now. We have two things that are already done. We had one of our community members add a missing toolkit feature. Back in JDK 9, when we hit all the internal API, we surfaced a number of things that were wanting to be public, and we just missed one. We surfaced, these are all a bunch of related functions, and we made public APIs for all of them but one, and somebody noticed and did that. It's a very small feature, but it was a handy thing that somebody was able to do. And then we had a performance improvement go in. We have partial support right now for emojis and hope to continue to improve that. And then a few other things that might or might not get in, depending. And just a little disclaimer down at the bottom, we are a train model. They will go in when they're ready. So until they're in, they're not in. They may or may not make 21. So as I mentioned, we already have early access builds available. You can either go to openjfx.io or you can go to jdk.java.net. And that latter one is the same place you can go and get JDK 21 early access from. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and spend some time talking about some of the things we're working on. The first one we're working on is something that we're calling JavaFX Notebook. It's a technology demo. And the main reason we're doing it is covered by that first bullet item. We want to make it easy for students and others who are getting started with JavaFX to be able to do that without having to learn a bunch of difficult concepts that tend to trip up beginners. JavaFX enables applications with a lot of rich content, but there is an awful lot of boilerplate, even for the simplest Hello World example. And when you get into things like charts and tables and other things, there's even more boilerplate. It becomes harder and harder to figure out how to manage all these classes. Plus, JavaFX's threading model tends to trip up beginners. And so what we'd like to do is make it so that people getting started with don't have to learn as much to get started. And so this is a proof of concept demo of some of these ideas. It allows you to code in JavaFX without initially having to learn things like threading and some of the other things that are harder to get started with. And then some of these utilities that we're coming up with right now, they're just part of the demo, and we might surface some of them in the JavaFX API. So this is a notebook-style application for those who might be familiar with Jupyter notebooks. It's a way to allow you to mix documentation, coding, do some interactivity, and we have persistence that allows you to save and restore one of those notebooks. We are able to edit existing cells, and the cells can either be documentation or code. The code cells, when you edit them, they're immediately re-executed, and every cell later on in the notebook is also re-executed, and I'll show some examples of that. And because we're not going to be able to do everything, we're looking at how best to make this extensible, so we're thinking about that right from the beginning. So what I'm going to be running here is a JavaFX application, and it's run on top of a JDK. We're actually using JDK 20 GA, and we're using an early access version of JavaFX 21 to run this. It's got JShell integration, a few charting utilities, and a number of other convenience features. And it uses Jackson to read and write the JSON. And so with that, I'll start up the demo. Okay, so first of all, when you bring it up, you just get a blank page. You can load in an existing one, but I'll just show you some of the things that you can do. Oops, let me just move that out of the way. All right, so we can do simple things like just 1 times 2. Well, that's not very interesting. How about 3 times 4? Or I can put that in a variable. So I can say variable A equals 4, and then I can say B equals 7, and then I can say variable C equals A times B. Well, now what if I want to change A? A doesn't want to be 4, it wants to be 6. Well, you can see everything gets re-executed after that. Or I can say equals 6.3. Now all of a sudden it's floating point, and it changes to that. The other thing we can do is file completion. So if I wanted to do, I think that's set up, error.println. So if I type in println, hello, it'll do that. And now if I wanted to do something in JavaFX, well, let me draw a circle. So circle equals new circles. Make it 50. I get a green circle. But now what I want to do is maybe draw a stroke on that. So I'm going to do circle dot. Oops. that. You get the idea there. And then I could save this if I wanted to. So I'm just going to save it as something called circle. Actually, let me do this. And now I'm going to create a new one. 1 times 2, I can still do that. And I can load the existing one. And reload it. And then I decide I don't want it color. I don't want green. I want teal. So it'll do that. So now what I want to do is show some of the charting utilities that we have put in there. So we'll start just sort of going through this a little bit. At the top, we've defined a record. So this is using JDK 16, I think it was, that finalized them records. And we've defined an angle, a sine, and a cosine as 3 values of that record. And so we're going to create a list of waves. And so we're just going to take the start angle and end angle, create a list of those, and then we're going to set the cosine to the cosine of that and the sine to the sine of that. And so now we've got this list, and you can see it right here, and it just displays it right there. And now what we're going to do is just print out the first 5 values, just so you can see the data that it's there. And then we're going to create a line chart using that. And so we've got several convenience methods that were included in JavaFX Notebook. And this one just takes a list and creates a line chart. And it will take the list, and optionally, you can specify the x and y axis values. And so that's what you get out of there. We also have a couple of other different ways to do it that are maybe a little more compact, depending on what you prefer to do. And this one just uses a convenient collector so that you can do it just in one shot there. So you can just do the collector that turns it right into a line chart in the middle of your stream. So the other thing that we expect this will be useful for is for people who want to take data sets and just play around with it a little bit to maybe get some insights into what that data looks like. And so we're going to open up a data set that was created from the Titanic passenger data. And so what this is we took some data that was in a public domain data set. In fact, you can read about that right there. What it is a CSV file that has some holes in it, but largely it has for each passenger. Some fields are pretty much always there, although there are few that can be blank, but you basically have the name, what passenger class they were in, their sex, their age, and whether or not they survived, and a few other things. And so this shows using a documentation cell, so there's a self-documenting. And then what we did is we took that data and we created a couple of data structures, an enum for the passenger class, first, second, or third, one for sex, and then a record that includes all of the things we're going to track when we're trying to look at this data in the Titanic. And then we created a list of those by reading in this JSON data set that we created from the CSV data set. And so it's just a one line to read in the entire Titanic data. And there are 1,309 passengers, and we said, all right, let's just take that list and turn it into a table. And so that's what we've done here. And we've got, this is a JavaFX table that's embedded in line because that's what this one does, that turns it into a JavaFX table view. Oops. And you can sort based on name or sex or age. But maybe we want to get a little bit more insight as to how to visualize that data. So we can do some charting with it. And I'll open up this pie chart. And what we did, so the first part of this is exactly the same as the previous notebook that I did. So we've got this list of Titanic passengers, and so now we're creating a class's map. And so that's a map that maps the passenger class and the number of passengers in that class. And so out comes out, there are 277 second class passengers, 323 first class, and 709 third class passengers. And so then we can do other things. We can say, well, let's look at the survivors by the sex of the passenger. And so what we did is we filtered by the survivors, and then we collected them into a group of their sex and the number within there. And so then we got 339 women and 169 men. Well, that's nice, but now what if I wanted to go back and take the first one, and I wanted to gain a little insight into what percentage of each different class survived. So we have obviously more third class passengers, so there's going to be more third class deaths, but is it more than the population would represent? Well, we can do that by let's creating a deaths by class. And so I'll just do this real time. We'll see how well I do. Equals, so passengers dot stream. So now we're going to say not survived. So we want to say that they, and then we want to do a collect. Oh, how about if I spell it right? Thank you. I was just seeing if you were paying attention. That's why I need file completion. It's a good feature for me when my fingers don't work. And so then now I can just do a display. Down here. Display map. Map to pie chart. Deaths by class. And so my insight was correct. A higher percentage of third class passengers died than their population in the passenger list would suggest. And that, of course, is sadly true. That's actually what happened. So there are some other things, of course, you can do to get some insights into your data. You can display it with different kinds of charts. You can cut the data in different ways. And what we're trying to show here is how easy it can be. And this is by no means done. This isn't even ready to be released. It's a technology demo right now. And at some point, we hope to be able to share it with people to see what they might want to do with it or how they might use it. So now if we go back to this, the other demo I want to show is something that we've also been working on that we've noticed for the longest time has been missing from JavaFX. We've talked for a lot of years. It's probably shown up on every slide of things we might do in the future for the last 10 years. And we're finding, though, more and more we have to do that. More and more applications are starting to expect at least some level of support for stylized text. I mean, you can do it in Swing. You can actually do it in JavaFX, but it's with a fairly heavyweight, somewhat limited component called HTML editor. That's our answer today for stylized text, and it's not a very satisfying one. And so what people want to do with that is a number of things. Syntax highlighting is an obvious one. Another one is just to include inline emphasis for a number of different things like font styles, different font weights, sizes, and for highlighting as well. And so what we're looking to do is provide at some point a demo, or actually no, today I'm showing you a demo. What we hope to do is actually provide a rich text area control, but our plan is not to have it be a full-blown text editor. We're not going to give you Microsoft Word or Sublime or the text editing features of an IDE, but we hope we can give you a basic control that you could then extend to do that yourself. And so the demo I'm going to show is just an early prototype of something that we've been working on. And there will be 3 different data models we're going to show. The first one gives you stylized text with embedded images and an embedded FX control. And then we're going to show a large model, because one of the things we want to support is virtualization. I'm going to show a model so large you could not possibly put it in memory all at once. And then finally, an editable plain text model. Eventually, the other two models will be editable as well. The idea, though, is we just want to show that, yes, we have some of that working now. It's not yet completely working for stylized text. But a lot of things are working, and so I'll be showing selection and highlighting, navigation and scrolling, and then a simple copy-paste. And so with that, I will run the demo. And let me put this in the background so that it doesn't get in our way. So what we have here is a mix of stylized text. So you can see at the beginning, that's a stylized text that is underlined and somewhat larger. We have an embedded image with a caption that's italicized and smaller. And then we have some syntax highlighted code right here. And you can already see that selection and highlighting works. Navigation is working. And then this is an embedded FX control. We have emoji support and support for different languages, different writing styles, and then just a number of things there. So you could do selection, and now I'm going to show the virtualization. I may go back to that last one. In fact, I will when I go to the editable text. So this one is a model with 1 billion, with a B, 1 billion lines of text. There is no way you could store this in memory at once. So rather, this model has a factory method, much like our table view does, where you can, we can store tables also with more than you can fit in memory. The idea being is that you create them on demand when they're asked for. And so this model, every time it's asked for, gives at a particular line the text that represents that line. So I can scroll all the way down, and you can see it goes pretty quickly. And then I get all the way down to the 1 billionth line. And I can select, I can highlight, I can move, I can select all, but I'm not going to copy everything because I know what will happen. And that works pretty well. And now I want to show an editable model, but first what I'm going to do is show copy-paste. So I'm going to copy this. And you can copy it either with the Command-C shortcut that I did, or you can use the context menu. And now I'm going to go into the editable plain text model and paste that. Well, here we don't have the highlighting because this is a plain text model. We've intentionally lost the highlighting, but I can go in, I can say, I can make that class abstract. And I can call it my rich text area demo, or not. And then we can, within the model, we can cut and paste as well. And you can see that it's got support for things like double click and triple click, the things you'd expect from a text demo. So that's most of what I wanted to show here. And so that's something we're working on, and hope to bring that to fruition before too long. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so now just maybe a few things about features, and then we'll wrap up. So first, just a couple of notes about general policy for our features. As I mentioned before, there's a high bar for getting new features in. Features that can be done on top of the library should be. If there's something fundamental, we'll add it. But if something can be built on top, well, then that's really the application's job to build it on top. A good example of that is what I just showed with the rich text area control. We're likely to provide a simple rich text area control, but we're not going to provide a word processor. So if you want that, you build it yourself on top of what we provide you. For ongoing work, we're going to be doing a lot of bug fixing and platform support, as well as updates to other third-party libraries. But we're also looking at what sorts of small enhancements we can do. And then, as we mentioned, rich text area control that we'd like to do. For platform, so this is getting to Julian's question, we've got deprecated OpenGL library from Apple. They deprecated that actually back in 10.14. And Metal has been their focus. For a while, they're going to support both. At some point, they'll degrade the performance of OpenGL because it will just be too expensive for them to do it. In fact, they may already implement their OpenGL on top of Metal for all I know. The end is coming for OpenGL. Maybe not tomorrow, but we need to be working on it. Java 2D already delivered a Metal pipeline for the JDK. We're working on it for FX actively. And we're going to leverage Project Lanai's work, which is the one that gave Metal to Java 2D. We're also looking at replacing the deprecated macOS accessibility APIs, and perhaps looking at things like DirectX 11 or 12 support. For similar reasons, although Microsoft is usually a little more careful about backward compatibility than Apple is. And then at some point, we'll look into Wayland, although that's likely going to lag a bit. And then we've got a few ideas, such as the ideas from the JavaFX notebook that you saw and a few table view improvements. And then desktop and platform integration has always been an area that people have asked for, and so we're looking at ways we can do that a little bit better, as well as a few other things, media features and so on. And then we're always asking the community what they would like to see. And so the call to action for everybody is download JavaFX 20 and JDK 20 today, or if you want to be on the bleeding edge, download 21 early access for both JDK and JavaFX. File bug reports and meet us online at the OpenJDK Dev mailing list. And now I'll take a few questions, although I think we're probably close to out of time.